Today we're going to be looking at Arctic Fox in the color Ginger Flare. So this is a little bit of a last minute thing. I had no idea it was coming out, so I had to rearrange some things in my schedule, but I wanted to prioritize it. So first thing you may notice is that my swatches are labeled 1 through 12. I just want to say really quick that is not synonymous with hair levels. Since I do different video clips and pictures and such throughout the video, the numbers just help us keep track of each swatch. Also, while these are human hair swatches, they are not virgin hair. So that basically means that they've been chemically colored, treated, or bleached at some point in their existences. 1 is green. Anytime I do warm tones, I usually try to do green underneath to see how it interacts. 2 is gray. 3 is a natural red. 4 is black. And then 4 to 11 is a range that goes to platinum blonde. And then 12 is like a toned version of number 11. So to start, I will take the color directly from the container and I will apply it at the top of each swatch. Then some people do like to dilute their dyes, so I'll do a diluted version at the bottom of each swatch. Please keep in mind, everyone's hair is different, which means everyone's hair will take color differently. Plus, different screens and monitors and such can make colors look different, so please just use this video as a reference for how this could maybe possibly turn out for you. Also, I did want to get your opinion on something. So originally, I was going to do an Arctic Fox mix relatively soon, and I posted a poll with some of the most requested mixes that I have, and Porridge mixed with Electric Paradise actually won, but someone pointed out that Porridge is no longer on the website. So I asked Arctic Fox if it was discontinued, and it was. They claimed that they were making room for other colors, which turned out to be this Ginger Flare. So I decided I'm not going to do the winning mix, which has Porridge in it. I could either just do the second winner, like the second runner up, or I could take some requests on Ginger Flare mixes and have you guys vote on those instead for the next Arctic Fox video. Please let me know. If not, the runner-up for the mix request was Ritual mixed with Virgin Pink. So just let me know what you'd rather see first. Eventually, everything will be done, but what are you guys most excited for? For the diluted section, we're going to do a 4-to-1 ratio. So that's going to be 1 part of our color to 4 parts of diluter. Now, if you don't know what diluter is, my simple answer is that it's basically something that lightens the color of a semi-permanent dye. Now, each brand usually will sell their own version of a diluter that will give you a nice smooth consistency. It'll match the consistency of the dye. So you can always use that if you feel more comfortable. But to keep things fair between all of my colors, I always just use a plain white conditioner as my diluter. So I'm going to let these sit for probably about 3 hours so that the swatches have time to fully absorb the color. I will then rinse them out, and when they're dry, I will meet you back here and we can do some comparisons. So my first observation is that this does seem to be quite pigmented. Now again, my swatches are not virgin hair. Virgin hair tends to have a harder time taking and holding on to color, so beware of that. If you have virgin hair and you try this, it may not turn out like my swatches, especially if your hair is darker. But considering I see a difference on all of the swatches except number 4, that does tell me it's pretty pigmented, and something like this will be a little bit better for hair that's virgin versus maybe some other more pastel colors. So number 1 was originally green. On the direct dye portion, it actually looks kind of natural compared to the lighter ones. So this color, it's called Ginger Flare. So I'm assuming the idea is to have a slightly more natural orangey look versus a super traditional orange, but it's still a fun hair color. Again, over the green, it definitely pulls out a lot more of like a brown look, so it almost looks a little bit more natural. It definitely still is very saturated, so it's kind of got like a brighter look to it for being kind of a natural vibe, but it looks really good. The diluted section, I still see some green in it. I think maybe if you dilute it less than what I did, you might get a little bit more coverage without it being as dark. Number 2 was the gray. I also feel like that swatch turned out a little bit more natural looking compared to the blonde swatches. I have to assume that is because there's a lot of like warmth in the blonde swatches that combines with the orangey color to create a bright saturated look, whereas the gray was a lot more cool in undertone. I still think the green looks a little bit more natural than the gray, but the gray definitely has a slightly more natural vibe in comparison. 3 was the natural red. That one I think does still have a pretty natural look as well. Oftentimes I notice on natural reds, whenever you do like a pink or an orange on top, it kind of just punches up the color and makes it look a little less dull, which is what I think happened here on both the top and the bottom. The top is just a little bit darker, which I think happened on pretty much all of the swatches. 4 was black. I don't see a difference there. If we disregard number 4, I think 5 is the least different out of all of the swatches, but I do still see a slight bit of warmth on the top versus the bottom. It still looks relatively brown. I think the orange just kind of changed the undertone of the brown a little bit on top. And then number 6 and onward, it definitely has a more orangey vibe. Obviously, 6 still looks more brown compared to the lighter ones, but it took the orange so well that it almost looks like a really dark orangey reddish color. And the diluted version is just a slightly lighter version of the top. Still took a lot of that orange. So the dye itself does seem to be pretty dark. If you look at 10, 11, and 12, you can see that. I'm not sure if the 8 and 9 were kind of struggling to take the color or something, because they are not quite as dark as these. So this could maybe be like the person's hair might just not take color as well. And if you have virgin hair, it could be a little bit more what it turns out on you, because they do say that the more bleached your hair is, the more porous and more it can absorb color, which could explain why these ones are darker. I also do think because we're looking at the swatches compared to diluted sections that look very orange, we kind of get an orange vibe from everything. But I do think that if you were to do this on your hair, it would probably look a little bit more red on its own. It does have a very red undertone, so also be warned of that. If you're looking for an orange, I would definitely do a strand test before committing completely, but overall it is just slightly more muted, I would say, than a regular orangey color would be. So for our first comparison, I thought it would be the smartest to compare it to Arctic Fox in the color Sunset Orange so we can really see the difference. This is comparable to number 12, number 11, number 10, and this is comparable to number 9. So first thing I want to note is that I did Sunset Orange very early on in my channel, so my numbering system is a little different. And I also used to do 2 separate diluted parts. So this part right here is the direct dye portion on the swatches. You can definitely see now just how bright the Sunset Orange is in comparison. And you can see just how muted and a little bit more natural the Ginger Flare is. While the Ginger Flare is pretty red in undertone, I actually think the Sunset Orange is a little bit more red, but because it's so bright, it doesn't have the same kind of natural red kind of look to it. And it's a little hard to tell because I did the Sunset Orange so long ago, but it does seem like the Ginger Flare is a little bit more pigmented than the Sunset Orange. I have done quite a few different types of oranges on my channel. I will say there is no exact comparison that I have currently, so I decided to go with the color that had the most similar undertone, and that's Color Lux in the color Copper. This is comparable to number 12, 11, 10, and 9. So pretty much most of my oranges do lean a little bit more yellow in compared to the Ginger Flare, and hopefully you can see this as well, just how red it does look on the top especially. Color Lux Copper is clearly not as dark and definitely more orangey in comparison to the Ginger Flare. But if you look at the diluted sections and you see their undertones, they're not too wildly different from each other, which is why I decided to compare them. So I would say for my swatches, based off the ones I was considering comparing, Lunar Tide's Siam Orange is going to be the next in line. It's a little bit more yellow in undertone, but it is a little bit darker as well. So it's a little bit closer to the top in depth, but not quite as red, just a little bit. And then if you're still looking for something a little bit more golden in undertone, from that, the Overtone Ginger is the most kind of goldeny in undertone and a little bit more muted, so it has a slightly more natural look compared to the Lunar Tides, but it is still lighter than the Lunar Tides. So now I'd like to get into our before and after clips. Those, as well as everything after this point in the video, is all going to be done in natural lighting. if you have a request. I do have a link below to a Google form you can fill out. Just remember, I only do brands that do not test on animals. Also, don't forget to let me know whether or not you'd rather see a ginger flare mix next, or just do the runner-up winner from the last poll that I did, since I can't do porridge anymore. Thank you so much, my patrons, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.